You know that feeling, right? When you think you've finally moved on, when you've built a new life, a new empire, even... And then she walks back in. Not just anywhere, but at your wedding. Your billionaire wedding. And suddenly everything you thought you knew, every carefully constructed wall just shatters. You think you know how this story goes. The scorned ex, the dramatic scene. But trust me, you have no idea. Because what happened next, what the billionaire groom did, it wasn't what anyone expected. And it wasn't just about revenge or even forgiveness. It was about something far deeper, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for years, waiting for the perfect, catastrophic moment to explode. This isn't just a story about a wedding crash. It's about a man, a woman, and a secret that could change everything. And by the end of this, you'll be asking yourself, what would I do? Hey everyone, and welcome back to a story that's going to stick with you long after it's over. We all love a good drama, especially when it's wrapped up in a bit of mystery and a whole lot of unexpected twists. Today we're diving into a tale that blurs the lines between past and present, love and resentment, and what it truly means to let go, or to hold on tighter than ever. Imagine being at the pinnacle of your success, about to marry the person you believe is your future, and then the ghost of your past, the one you thought you'd buried forever, reappears. Not subtly, not quietly, but with a grand entrance that screams for attention. This isn't just a tale of two people. It's a testament to how profoundly our past relationships shape us, how they linger in the shadows, and how sometimes they can resurface in the most spectacular and unsettling ways. So settle in, because this one is a wild ride of emotions, choices, and consequences that no one saw coming. Our story begins with Alexander Vance, think ambition personified, a titan of industry by the age of 35. He built a tech empire from the ground up, fueled by an almost obsessive drive. He was the kind of man who commanded respect just by walking into a room. His suits were always perfectly tailored, his gaze sharp, his words precise. He lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, a testament to his relentless pursuit of success. Every morning, he'd wake before dawn, hit the gym, review market trends, and then tackle a dozen business deals before most people had even finished their first coffee. He had everything money could buy: a private jet, a sprawling vineyard estate, a collection of vintage cars that would make any enthusiast swoon. Yet for all his material wealth, there was always a subtle undercurrent of something missing, a quiet solitude that even his closest advisors noticed, but never dared to mention. He was, by all accounts, about to complete his perfect life. His wedding to the stunning and equally accomplished Victoria Sterling was the social event of the year. Victoria was a renowned architect, elegant, intelligent, and poised. They met at a charity gala. A whirlwind romance followed, and their engagement was announced 6 months later. Everyone called them the power couple, destined for greatness. The wedding was planned to perfection. A grand affair at Alexander's private estate, overlooking a manicured lake, with thousands of white roses, a string quartet, and a guest list that read like a who's who of the global elite. Every detail, from the handcrafted invitations to the bespoke menu, spoke of opulence and flawless execution. Victoria looked radiant in her custom-designed gown, a picture of grace and happiness. Alexander, in his equally custom-made tuxedo, stood at the altar, a faint smile playing on his lips as he watched his bride walk towards him. He was ready. He was finally truly ready to close the chapter on his past and embrace a future he had meticulously designed. But life, as it often does, has a cruel sense of humor. Just as the minister began to speak, just as Victoria reached Alexander's side, a ripple went through the assembled guests, a collective gasp, a turning of heads. And there she was, entering the grand hall, not subtly, not discreetly, but with a deliberate, almost defiant stride. Ilara Vance, his ex-wife. She hadn't been invited, of course. Her presence was an uninvited storm, a sudden gust of wind threatening to extinguish the perfectly lit candles of Alexander's new beginning. Ilara was a vision, though perhaps a jarring one. She wore a dress that was undeniably striking, a vibrant emerald green that seemed to defy the muted elegance of the wedding palette. It wasn't a wedding guest dress. It was a statement. Her hair, usually styled in soft waves, was pulled back in a sharp, severe ponytail, highlighting cheekbones that seemed sharper, eyes that seemed to hold a challenge. She walked with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces, finally landing on Alexander. And in that moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The string quartet faltered. A few guests whispered, others simply stared wide-eyed. Alexander's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief and something akin to dread. Victoria, sensing the shift, turned, her eyes widening as she saw the uninvited guest. The air, already thick with anticipation, now crackled with an unspoken tension, a silent question hanging heavy. What did she want? And more importantly, what would Alexander do? This wasn't just a gate-crasher. This was a ghost from a past Alexander had painstakingly tried to erase, now standing right in the middle of his perfect, meticulously planned future. The challenge had been laid bare, and everyone was waiting to see how the billionaire groom would respond. The silence in the room stretched, taut and agonizing. It felt like an eternity, though in reality only a few seconds had passed. Ilara reached the front row, directly across from Alexander and Victoria, her gaze unwavering, fixed solely on Alexander. The emerald green of her dress seemed to glow under the chandeliers, a stark contrast to Victoria's pristine white. Alexander's jaw tightened. He hadn't seen Ilara in 5 years, not since the divorce, a bitter, drawn-out affair that had left him emotionally scarred and wary. Their separation had been messy, a public spectacle fueled by tabloid headlines and whispered rumors. He had moved on, or so he thought. He had built an impenetrable fortress around his heart, and Victoria was the key he had finally trusted to unlock it. Now Ilara stood there, a living, breathing reminder of a past he desperately wanted to forget. Victoria, sensing the gravity of the situation, squeezed Alexander's arm gently. Her face, usually so composed, now showed a flicker of confusion, then concern. She looked from Ilara to Alexander, silently seeking an explanation. The guests were a tableau of hushed murmurs and sidelong glances. You could almost feel the collective itch to pull out phones and start recording, but decorum for now held them back. Alexander finally broke the silence, his voice low, steady, but with an edge of steel. "Ilara, what are you doing here?" Ilara finally broke her stare from Alexander and offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I came to congratulate you, Alexander, on your wedding." Her voice, surprisingly calm, carried across the quiet hall. It wasn't the dramatic outburst everyone expected. It was something far more unnerving. It was controlled, almost rehearsed. A collective sigh of relief or perhaps disappointment rippled through the guests. Maybe this wouldn't be a dramatic scene after all. Maybe she was just eccentric, but Alexander knew Ilara. He knew that calm was often a precursor to a storm. "You're not welcome here," Alexander stated, his voice now devoid of any emotion, a flat declaration. He motioned to one of his security guards, a hulking figure named Marcus, who immediately began to approach Ilara, but Ilara didn't flinch. She simply held up a hand, a delicate, almost regal gesture. "Wait, I just have something to say." To Alexander. Her eyes flickered to Victoria for a brief moment, a look Alexander couldn't quite decipher. Was it pity, or something else entirely? Marcus hesitated, looking at Alexander for further instruction. Alexander, caught between his desire to maintain decorum and his rising irritation, simply nodded, a tight, curt movement of his head. He wanted this over. He wanted her gone. Ilara took a deep breath, her gaze once again locking with Alexander's. 5 years ago, Alexander, you told me I was the biggest mistake of your life. That I held you back. That I was a drain on your ambition. Her voice remained steady, but a subtle tremor was now evident, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. You said I was disposable. Easily replaced. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, a silent accusation. And you know what? For a long time I believed you. A murmur went through the crowd. This was getting uncomfortable. Victoria shifted uncomfortably beside Alexander, her hand still linked through his arm. Alexander's face was unreadable. A stone mask, but his eyes, if you looked closely, held a flicker of something ancient and raw. I believed I wasn't enough, Ilara continued, her voice gaining a surprising strength. I believed I deserved to be cast aside. I spent years rebuilding, redefining myself. And I succeeded. I found my own ambition, my own worth. She took a step closer, just one step, but it felt like miles. But there's one thing I never forgot, Alexander. One thing you said that day you walked out. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was leaning forward, desperate to hear what came next. Even the minister, usually so composed, looked utterly bewildered. You said, Elara's voice was now a clear, resonant bell echoing through the hushed hall, that I would never find true happiness without you. That no one would ever love me the way you did, because no one would ever put up with me like you did. She let out a small, mirthless laugh. You were wrong, Alexander. And then she did something truly unexpected. She reached into a small, elegant clutch bag she carried and pulled out a single, pristine white envelope. She didn't throw it, didn't crumple it. She simply held it out towards Alexander. This, she said, her voice softer now, almost wistful, is an invitation to my wedding. The gasp that followed was louder this time, a collective exhalation of shock. Alexander's mask finally broke. His eyes widened, a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like hurt or perhaps confusion crossing his features. Victoria's grip on his arm tightened, her head turning sharply towards Elara, a new intense curiosity in her gaze. Elara offered another small smile, this one less defiant, more genuinely satisfied. I'm marrying next month, to a man who loves me not despite my ambition, but because of it. A man who sees my worth, not my flaws. A man who believes in partnership, not ownership. She then looked directly at Victoria, her gaze softening for the first time. I wish you both happiness, truly, but I wanted Alexander to know that I found it too, and I didn't need him to find it. With that, she placed the invitation on a nearby table, a delicate cardstock against the heavy oak. She then turned, and with the same defiant grace with which she entered, she began to walk out. The silence that followed her departure was heavy, charged with 1,000 unspoken questions. The string quartet remained silent. The minister remained frozen. And Alexander. He stood at the altar, the most powerful man in the room, but in that moment, utterly, completely speechless. The dramatic scene everyone expected hadn't happened. Instead, something far more unsettling had played out. Elara hadn't come to destroy his wedding. She had come to announce her own triumph, and in doing so had irrevocably altered the atmosphere of his. The problem wasn't a fight. It was the quiet, undeniable shift in power, the subtle yet profound declaration of independence that left Alexander reeling. The challenge was no longer her presence, but the realization that his past, which he thought he controlled, had just played its final masterful move. The wedding continued, or at least it attempted to. The minister, after a hesitant glance at Alexander, cleared his throat and resumed the ceremony. Victoria, though visibly shaken, composed herself with remarkable grace. She squeezed Alexander's hand again, a silent reassurance, perhaps also a silent question. Alexander, however, was no longer fully present. His gaze kept drifting to the empty space where Elara had stood, then to the invitation sitting innocently on the table. The words of the minister, the vows, the music, it all seemed distant, muffled by the echo of Elara's pronouncements. The joy, the unbridled happiness that had filled the air moments before had been replaced by a lingering sense of unease. It was like a beautiful painting, with a jarring, unexpected brushstroke right in the center. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered, trying to piece together the fragments of the drama they had just witnessed. Others simply watched Alexander, curious to see how he would recover. The elaborate reception, which was supposed to be a joyous celebration, now felt subdued. The laughter a little too forced, the conversations a little too careful. Victoria, sensing Alexander's preoccupation, tried to engage him to bring him back, but his answers were short, distracted. The perfect day had been irrevocably tainted. Over the next few weeks, Alexander found himself increasingly agitated. Elara's uninvited appearance and her audacious announcement had burrowed deep under his skin. He tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it as a desperate plea for attention, a final act of bitterness. But the image of her, serene and confident, holding that wedding invitation, kept replaying in his mind. He found himself questioning things he thought were settled. Was he truly happy? Was this life he had meticulously built truly fulfilling, or was it just a grand distraction? Victoria, his new wife, noticed the change. Alexander, usually so focused and driven, was now often lost in thought, his usual sharp wit dulled. Their conversations, once vibrant and engaging, became strained. She tried to understand, to ask him about Ilara, about his past, but he would shut down, retreating further into himself. The open loops Ilara had created were now unraveling in Alexander's mind, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths he had long suppressed. He had always believed he was the one who had moved on, the one who had won the breakup. But Ilara's calm assertion of her own happiness, her own success without him, had challenged that narrative in a fundamental way. He had built his empire on the belief that he was indispensable, and Ilara's message had directly contradicted that core belief. One evening, unable to sleep, Alexander found himself staring out at the city lights from his penthouse. The vastness of the city, once a symbol of his achievement, now felt isolating. He thought back to his marriage with Ilara. It hadn't been perfect, not by a long shot. They had met in college, two ambitious young people passionate about their dreams. Alexander had been building the foundations of his tech startup, and Ilara, then an aspiring artist, had been his biggest supporter, his confidant. They had shared late-night brainstorming sessions, celebrated small victories, and comforted each other through setbacks. But as Alexander's company grew, as his ambition consumed him, their relationship began to fray. He became more distant, more demanding. He saw Ilara's artistic pursuits as a distraction, her emotional needs as a burden. He had been so focused on the external markers of success that he had neglected the internal landscape of his own happiness, and, crucially, the happiness of the person he claimed to love. He remembered the arguments, the subtle put-downs, the way he had dismissed her dreams. He had convinced himself that she was holding him back, that she couldn't keep up with his meteoric rise. And then he had uttered those harsh, unforgivable words, the ones Ilara had quoted at his wedding. "You're the biggest mistake of my life. You're disposable." The memory burned, a bitter taste in his mouth. He had been so young, so arrogant, so blinded by his own ambition. He truly believed he was doing the right thing, cutting ties with anything that didn't serve his singular purpose. He had believed it was a clean break, a necessary severing. But as Ilara had proven, some ties, even when broken, still leave deep, complex scars. And sometimes those scars are not on the one who was left, but on the one who left them. The problem wasn't just Ilara's appearance. It was the entire edifice of Alexander's self-perception that was now being challenged. He had always seen himself as the victor, the one who had escaped a dead-end relationship to achieve greatness. Ilara's quiet triumph at his wedding had flipped that script. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply living her best life, and that, ironically, was more unsettling than any dramatic scene she could have caused. It meant his narrative, the one he had held on to for years, was incomplete. It meant he might have been wrong. And for Alexander Vance, being wrong was anathema. He found himself researching Ilara, something he hadn't done in years. It was easy enough, given his resources. He discovered she had indeed flourished. She had opened her own art gallery, specializing in avant-garde installations that had garnered critical acclaim. Her work explored themes of resilience, self-discovery, and the beauty of imperfection. She had become a respected figure in the art world, sought after for commissions and interviews. Her success wasn't in direct competition with his, but it was undeniable, a testament to her own strength and vision. She hadn't tried to replicate his success. She had carved out her own unique path. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And the realization hit Alexander with the force of a physical blow. He hadn't broken her. He had perhaps set her free. This exploration into Ilara's life brought Alexander face to face with the painful truth about his own actions. He saw how his ego had driven him, how he had confused financial success with personal fulfillment. He had surrounded himself with people who admired his wealth and power, but few who truly knew him, truly challenged him. Victoria was wonderful, intelligent, beautiful, but their connection, he now realized, was built on a foundation of shared ambition and a mutual appreciation for a certain lifestyle, not the raw, unfiltered intimacy he had once, however briefly, shared with Ilara. He saw a hollowness in his own victories, a quiet ache that no amount of money or prestige could fill. He had achieved everything he set out to achieve, but he hadn't achieved peace. The challenge intensified for Alexander. He needed to understand the depth of his feelings, not just about Ilara, but about his own choices, his own definition of success and happiness. He realized that Ilara's appearance wasn't an attack, but a mirror, reflecting back at him the parts of himself he had tried to bury. He wasn't grappling with Ilara's presence. He was grappling with his own past, his own pride, and the uncomfortable possibility that he had been the one who had truly lost something invaluable. The information gap Ilara had created was now a gaping chasm in his perception of his own life, and he felt compelled to bridge it, to finally understand the true cost of his ambition. One afternoon, a month after his wedding, Alexander sat in his home office, staring at Ilara's wedding invitation. He picked it up, feeling the expensive cardstock, seeing the elegant calligraphy. He remembered the feeling of her hand in his, the way she used to laugh, the unwavering belief she had in him before his ambition had consumed him. It was a stark contrast to the life he lived now, a life of endless meetings, strategic maneuvers and calculated risks. He missed something, a warmth, a spontaneity, that had been present in his life with Ilara. He realized he had chased success with such single-minded fervor that he had sacrificed genuine connection, authentic love, for it. And now, seeing Ilara's confident, radiant smile at his wedding, knowing she had found her own version of happiness, made him question everything. He thought about the life he was building with Victoria. She was a good woman, smart, kind, and beautiful. But there was a meticulousness to their relationship, a careful choreography of shared interests and mutual respect that lacked the wild, unpredictable passion he had once shared with Ilara. With Victoria, everything was planned, measured, perfect. With Ilara, it had been messy, exhilarating, alive. And in that moment, he realized he missed the mess. He missed the life that wasn't perfectly curated, but genuinely lived. The climax of this internal struggle came when Alexander found himself standing outside Ilara's art gallery, a discreet, elegant space tucked away in a revitalized urban district. He hadn't planned to go. His car had just seemed to take him there, a subconscious pull he couldn't resist. He stood there for a long time, watching people go in and out, seeing the vibrant, expressive art displayed through the large glass windows. It was her world, a world so different from his own. He saw a reflection of her spirit in the bold colors, the innovative forms, the quiet confidence that permeated the space. He knew instinctively that she was truly happy here, truly fulfilled. He finally gathered his courage and stepped inside. The gallery was filled with light and art, a vibrant living space. He spotted Ilara almost immediately. She was talking animatedly with a group of patrons, her face lit up, a genuine, joyful smile on her lips. She looked different, too. Not just successful, but at peace. There was a radiance about her, a lightness that he hadn't seen in years. She had truly become the woman she was meant to be, unburdened by his expectations, unhindered by his ambition. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Ilara's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of surprise, then something else, something unreadable, crossed her face. She excused herself from her conversation and slowly, deliberately walked towards him. The air crackled with unspoken history, with the weight of 5 years of separation and the dramatic reunion at his wedding. "Alexander," she said, her voice soft, devoid of the earlier defiance. "What are you doing here?" He took a deep breath, the words catching in his throat. He had rehearsed so many things to say, so many apologies, so many explanations. But now, looking at her, none of them seemed right. I needed to see you," he finally managed, his voice a little hoarse. "I needed to understand." Ilara simply nodded, her gaze steady, patient. She didn't look angry or even triumphant. She just looked understanding. "Understand what?" she asked gently. "Everything," he confessed, the word a raw admission. "The wedding, the invitation, your happiness, my mistakes," he swallowed hard. "I realized I was wrong, Ilara, about so many things, about you, about us, about what truly matters." A long silence followed, punctuated only by the distant hum of conversation in the gallery. Ilara's eyes searched his, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within them. He saw traces of hurt, of resignation, but also a profound sense of peace. Finally she spoke, her voice still soft, but with an underlying strength. "Alexander, what you said at the divorce, it broke me for a long time, but it woke me up. It forced me to find my own strength, my own path, and I did. I found a love that is kind and supportive and empowering. A love that doesn't try to change me but celebrates me." She paused, then looked at him with genuine sympathy. "I wanted you to know that. Not to hurt you, but because you needed to know that happiness isn't always found in grand gestures or material wealth. Sometimes it's found in letting go, in finding your own worth separate from anyone else's." "I know that now," Alexander admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "And I'm truly sorry, Alara, for everything." She offered him a small, sad smile. "I believe you are. And I forgive you, Alexander, truly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back." She looked past him towards the entrance of the gallery, and a tall, kind-faced man with a warm smile entered, walking directly towards her. It was her fiancé. "Darling," the man said, taking Alara's hand and offering Alexander a polite, if curious, nod. "Everything all right?" Alara squeezed his hand. "Everything's fine, Mark, just an old friend." She then turned back to Alexander, her gaze firm but gentle. "I wish you peace, Alexander, and true happiness. I hope you find it." And with that she turned, walking away with Mark, their hands intertwined, a picture of quiet contentment. Alexander watched them go, a profound sense of loss but also a strange sense of clarity washing over him. He had come seeking answers, and he had found them, though they weren't the answers he had expected. He had seen Alara's happiness, and in doing so had finally understood the true cost of his own choices. He realized that while he had accumulated immense wealth, he had lost something far more valuable, a connection to his authentic self, and a love that had once been pure and unwavering. As Alexander left the gallery, the city lights no longer felt isolating. They felt challenging, a challenge to redefine his own life, to find his own version of true happiness, one that wasn't built on external validation or material gain, but on genuine connection and self-acceptance. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He had a marriage to navigate, a life to reevaluate, and a past to fully reconcile with. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope, a sense of direction that transcended his relentless ambition. Alara's actions, her quiet triumph, had inadvertently given him a profound gift, the opportunity to truly see himself, and to begin the difficult journey of rebuilding his life, not just for success but for genuine fulfillment. So, what's the real takeaway here? It's not about who won the breakup or who ended up with more money. It's about how we define happiness and how the echoes of our past can force us to confront uncomfortable truths about our present. Alexander, the billionaire groom, thought he had everything. He had wealth, power, and a new, beautiful wife. But Alara, his ex-wife, by simply showing up and announcing her own quiet triumph, shattered his carefully constructed reality. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply living her best life, and in doing so she became a mirror, reflecting back at Alexander the true cost of his ambition. He realized that sometimes the greatest successes are found not in what we gain, but in what we learn to let go of. And the greatest love isn't always the one we chase, but the one we nurture within ourselves. This story is a powerful reminder that true fulfillment isn't bought, it's built, sometimes painstakingly, from the rubble of past mistakes and the courage to redefine what truly matters. It's about looking inwards and understanding that the most valuable treasures are often found not in the grand spectacles of life, but in the quiet, honest moments of self-discovery. Subscribe for more stories that make you think.